Hey guys, this is GlassVault. Welcome back. My name is John, and I appreciate you tuning in. And if you've been following, I appreciate you sticking with me. I did promise a React video to be next, but I just wanted to get some things off my chest first regarding just like research that I've been focused on. I did publish a post to LinkedIn earlier today. I will put that in the description around the concept of trust. So I've been thinking about trust really, in a technological way, but also just in human relationships and how we handle trust, in our day to day. And trust is dynamic. Trust is never just static. It's based on context. It's based on there are conditions that are involved. So with identity and with technology, as we continue to, see the adoption of AI and the development of AI as it's integrated into identity security and identity in general, whether it's a deep fake that is attempting to impersonate someone to gain access ultimately, or some type of threat actor that already has credentials and is in a system and is moving laterally. So kind of to get more in an anecdotal sense here, I used to work in a hotel. I used to work at the front desk, and this was like a fun job for me. I worked like the second shift. I would bake cookies for myself. It would be great. But yeah, one thing that I noticed is there is kind of this like theme of just like temporary privacy. It's a very transient space, right? You have people coming and going. I typically dealt with like business travelers, so you see regular guests, and get to know their routine, and really realizing how transient that is. It's like we're essentially, when you stay in a hotel, you're borrowing space, you're borrowing privacy, actually. And you're trusting, you're staying the night, you're sleeping in that hotel, and you're staying the night with the trust that you're safe, that the trust that no one's gonna walk into your room, that weird odor, something dangerous is gonna come through the air vents or whatever it may be. Like, you're trusting in the safety of that space and the privacy of that space, the security, right? So you can already probably see where I'm going here. And if you're looking at this from a security mindset, trust should be dynamic, and it is dynamic. So it's based off these conditions. So if we look at identity security, and the way that it's typically been handled in terms of, well, there's tokens. Somebody gets an access token. As long as someone provides that credential for that token, they get the token. Sure, access tokens expire. Sure, access tokens will have a lifespan, but those are static. Like, those lifespans are set to be static. We don't treat that token, which is essentially a trust agreement, we don't treat that in a dynamic manner. So that's essentially what I'm getting at, if you hear me. So I have just been down this rabbit hole regarding like trust concepts in tech and really what kind of drives that. And I'll get into this in another video, is Kerberos, the authentication protocol that's underneath Active Directory that, almost every enterprise on the planet is using for their identities. And so I'm talking about some core, technological aspect that also has a philosophy. We've been using the technology kind of quietly. Kerberos is always on, and essentially what Kerberos is that it's like a distribution center. It's a trust mediator, right? It grants trust, but that trust is time based, So we'll get into that. But really, my point for today, for this first video, is that we've kind of, in the name of things just working and being on, like, okay, we're able to authenticate a user. Okay, we're able to verify. Great. But however, now in the days of, there's all sorts of identities that are going to request a service. Artificial, human. You have threat actors that already have credentials, that have a spreadsheet of credentials that their fellow threat actors have shared with them. We have to think in post-credential terms now. And this is just going to evolve. I definitely predict that it's going to evolve, that we're going to have to look at trust as something that's dynamic. So if you're not too familiar with what I'm talking about, you could see trust as a simple definition is when you identify yourself, you are essentially trusted. You're essentially given what we're referring to as token or some type of validity, some object of validity that verification that you are who you say you are. And that token gives you access to what you're requesting. Or you can take that token and request and hit up a server. But really the core of that is, having that not essentially erode. I'm talking about erosion. I'm talking about decay. That's natural to life, right? Trust erodes. It requires re-verification. It requires reinforcement in a human relationship. It's like you haven't heard from someone in, 5 years. You don't know, where they're at. You still think about them maybe time from time. It doesn't mean that you don't like them anymore, but there needs to be a reinforcement, a reconnection at some point, right? In the same way, just you think of a sound, a physical object in a space, right? It's going to have a reverberation in it. If I go inside of a tunnel, or better yet, if I go inside of an empty warehouse, and I drop a huge container of bricks or something, it's gonna create a reverberation in that room, but that reverberation only lasts for so long. So that sound, that sonic, very finite element, that ephemeral element, it has a lifespan. So I guess what I'm saying is we have to start looking at identity in a similar fashion. We have to start looking at, as the lines blur between, human and artificial, we're going to have to really, trust is going to become a new currency. What I see in the attack surface is, as we said, credentials are big. It's a post-credential world. You should assume that someone has credentials. We're looking at post-authentication at this point of detection and response, ITDR, identity threat detection and response. I've been looking deep, pretty closely at that. Okay, so that's a new spin-off of IAM, and it basically is a response to, identity being the new perimeter and people coming from through the front door to get into systems. So a very necessary evolution. However, there's still a piece missing there. there's still a piece missing with how trust is defined and how it should be dynamic. We shouldn't be just verifying that once. Okay, like, tokens, yes, tokens expire, right? But the trust agreement, the trust properties, and the trust conditions that grant that token, those never change. Those stay static as of now in the technology. We just give that user new tokens, but we're not looking at the condition that we're giving them tokens in. We're not using behavior analytics when we redistribute or refresh that token. We're not sitting between the identity layer and the access layer and brokering trust like Kerberos does. So I'm suggesting essentially a modern version of Kerberos where trust is dynamic. It's time-based. There's time-based authentication. However, taking it a step further beyond Kerberos, there's almost like scoring, through behavior, through positive or negative events. The scoring, you can kind of think of it as scoring trust, right? For this identity, this relationship between, in Kerberos it's known as the KDC, the Key Distribution Center. That's the broker. They hand out the tickets. So that's kind of where I'm getting at with this. I don't want to get too technical in this one. I'm just letting you guys know. This is something that I'm completely focused on, exclusively now, is looking at authentication protocols with the idea of trust. It has to be dynamic, guys. It can't be static any longer because identities are mutating before our eyes. Just because an identity authenticates and the trust is established, we should not assume that that's the same identity 30, 40 minutes later. We shouldn't assume. What are we looking at, right? And I understand that ITDR has gotten to an extent of looking at, impossible travel, things like that, right? Session hijacking, right? But those are post auth situations. You've already authenticated the identity, and now it's oh shoot, we're watching them in a security camera. Shoot, they're in the room. What's going on? What are they doing? And so I'm still I'm still formulating this. This is very fresh. But it makes sense because, again, going back to Kerberos being this protocol that helps Active Directory run, essentially, in terms of authentication. The philosophy behind that, it was developed by MIT in the 80s. And they needed computers on a network to trust each other. So kind of looking at that same philosophy, okay, and focusing on trust again. We're focused on other aspects right now, but yeah, that's it for now, guys. I know it's I kind of jumped around there, but yeah, really, we have to see things as dynamic. I'm in the process of working on this engine, basically, that's gonna help with that aspect of seeing trust as dynamic. Okay. And this is something that can work with modern security tools. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel here. I'm very much research first and trying to help kind of patch the holes that I see. So if you're someone in the identity community, cyber community, privacy community, please reach out. These are concerns. We can't treat trust as static. You think of the analogy with the hotel, and I'll end with this. Going back to that hotel, someone checks in. They walk into the hotel, right? They're in the lobby. That's fine. Everyone's allowed to be in the lobby, right? It's a public space. Okay, so however, if they want to go upstairs, if someone wants to go into a room or into the gym or, the pool, whatever, like, that requires authentication. That requires a trust relationship to be established. And so in 2025, folks, identity is a lobby. Okay, we've got all sorts of identities from third party. Like, we've got non-human identities, machines having their own identities now, right? Like, you've got threat actors who already have credentials, just hanging out in the lobby, just waiting for an opportunity to move laterally, an opportunity to get an even better room in the hotel. And we've got this lobby, right? We can't stop people from coming to the front door, right? That's inevitable. That's public in a sense, right? It is. But what we can control is once they come to the front desk, or once they, if they try to go upstairs, it's like, okay, we're going to eventually find out, hi, how can I help you? Are you a guest? Would you like to check in? Who are you? And so eventually they're going to be at the front desk, right? At that point, we gain information about them, right? Credit card information, the length of their stay, their intent, right? And these elements are used to kind of create a trust profile with that person, with that identity, with that guest. Okay, they're here for 2 nights. This is the card that we're going to charge once their 2 nights is up, and use for incidentals. This is their name, this is their home address, etc. You get the point, right? So, they can go in their room, right? But if they try to open rooms that aren't theirs with their key, or start behaving erratically in the lobby, start making a mess in the bathroom, start, making strange noises from their room that are like disturbing people in the middle of the night, like, all of those things are going to erode trust on the hotel's part. It's because it's dynamic. It's not always a perfect scenario. Some people come in, they sleep, they check out. That's me. But not everyone has those intentions. But they still are able to go into a public space. They're still able to present an identity or credentials, and they're still able to gain access to privacy and resources. And so what I see with ITDR, is and a lot of IAM efforts right now is that we're rushing to kind of catch up on the post-authentication end. And so I'm kind of just reiterating, yes, we do need to look at pre-auth, correct. But more than that, we need to start tracking and scoring the measure of trust that an identity is carrying with them. And that's our trust, how much we can trust them, right? It's a healthy skepticism, right? Trust is dynamic. And this is true of human relationships as well. Like, as much as we like to think like, I trust people. Especially in 2025, like, honestly, you feel it. People are tense. Like, it's just how it is. You walk past someone and, they might look in the corner of their eye, depending on context, depending on where they are, depending on how you look, etc. Who else is around? Trust is just a dynamic thing. That's human nature. And the same should be going for technology, especially as the lines between technology and human nature blur. So I'm going to be continuing to talk about this and using these analogies. I have a protocol that I'm working on, and then a product that's going to support that protocol. And that's essentially something that can be added to a security environment that is meant to score that trust, okay? And is meant to see it as dynamic, because it is. And this is just, I believe, going to become a very important conversation in the identity security space. So whether or not anyone wants to engage with me on that now, they will be at some point. And if anyone would like to join the conversation, please drop comments. Let me know what you think. We're talking about authentication. Gotta kind of like zoom out, right? You're talking about authentication. We're talking about presence. We're talking about the presence of an identity, right? Which you could almost see it as like a weather map, There's conditions. It's not static. It's like, yes, it's 70 degrees outside, but the wind is 40 miles per hour, So it's like there's conditions like that matters. And with varying conditions and the fluidity of digital identities now, it's become less static, right? And so as a result, you're going to have these conditions. This is the case for anything, right? So I'm just challenging folks to kind of see things in this more kind of philosophical lens. And like, the parallels are all there, I think because like we tend to model things after human thinking and logic, right? So here we are, Trust seems to be kind of this forgotten aspect of, identity security and authentication. So lots more brewing there, but I'm gonna stop here and come back to this. But yeah, got a couple more things. We're gonna do a deep dive into Kerberos, that protocol that runs underneath Active Directory. So I'll kind of whiteboard that for people. There's some great resources out there currently on YouTube, but I'll put it in my own terms and just kind of see the bridge between the Kerberos that we know of today in Active Directory and kind of this evolution of that protocol that I'm currently working on with Reservation. The protocol that I'm working on for GlassVault, which is my security company. So, not a plug at all. This is like the beginning of kind of a thought space that I really felt was important, and I just would love and appreciate dialogue around it. I don't have all the answers, but I just think that, we're rushing to kind of patch things up, right? And kind of beat threat actors to the chase and deal with AI, and folks are burned out, and I just see that. But like sometimes it just takes stepping back, looking at the fundamentals, looking at the philosophies of some of these technologies. And when you do that, you're able to see kind of why we make decisions about what technology we choose over another. So that's the kind of thinking that I'm going to embrace here on this channel. And yeah, a lot more of this is coming. So thanks for listening to me for 26 minutes, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Talk to you soon. Bye.